Yes, these two have been battling out since the dawn of time. I'm pretty sure Jesus was tossing up between these two. I've got the 2025 Nissan Patrol Ti versus the 2025 Toyota LandCruiser Sahara. So 300 series versus Y62. Now these two have very different powertrain approaches, although they're not hybrid or anything like that, but in the Patrol you've got a 5.6 litre petrol V8, naturally aspirated, 298 kilowatts and 560 Newton meters paired to a 7-speed automatic, torque converter automatic with full-time four-wheel drive, while the LandCruiser features a 3.3 litre turbo diesel V6 engine, 227 kilowatts and 700 Newton meters paired to a 10-speed torque converter automatic, also with full-time four-wheel drive. So as you can see, the Patrol has an advantage here with more power, but the LandCruiser does produce quite a lot more torque than the Patrol. Put that into a calculator, the power figures, you get about 106 kilowatts per tonne in the Patrol versus 86 kilowatts per tonne in the LandCruiser. So big difference there between the two in terms of power to weight ratio. But then put the torque into a calculator, you get 201 Newton meters per tonne in the Patrol versus 267 Newton meters per tonne in the LandCruiser. Now torque is very important, especially with heavy vehicles. It's the stuff that gets it off the line, it's the grunt that pushes behind it, and then power is literally torque times revs. So as that kind of suggests, it's more about the top end and high revs. Diesels don't traditionally rev very high, so that's kind of why you don't get much power with a diesel in comparison to an equivalent petrol engine. Although that's a bit of a sort of general statement, but yeah, that's usually the case. So check out the quarter mile times and the trap speed between the two. I'm guessing the Patrol is going to have a faster trap speed. The weather was a little bit different between the two. So the LandCruiser I did in the morning, pretty early in the morning, and then the road was damp. Although I don't think that makes a big difference in terms of 0 to 100 and quarter mile for vehicles like this and for four-wheel drive vehicles. So there's no traction issues anyway. Although you could, say that it might be a little bit quicker in the dry. Mild conditions cold conditions for the LandCruiser, and then mild conditions today. It's about 23 degrees and about in the middle of the day. The only other difference is the Patrol, it's got about 3/4 of a tank for the performance test, and then the LandCruiser was about 1/4 of a tank. I didn't do that on purpose. It's just when I picked the LandCruiser up, it was already quite low. So I had to run it that day as well. As usual, I'll set up the tripod here on this private road for the full quarter mile, including at the start, about halfway, and then around the finish line. Although I think the quarter mile is just after the tripod. It's not by much, it might be 1 meter or 2 meters. It's just that the road is nicely marked out, so I know exactly where to put the tripod each time. And then the figures at the end are the best result I got out of each on the day with the V-Box. So the V-Box is on the side there. Gets a clear signal with GPS. It counts the moment the vehicle moves, and then it gives me exact figures to 2 decimal places. So I tried both vehicles, various takeoff methods and modes and so on, but yeah, those figures at the end are the best result I got out of the two. So regardless of what the virtual drag race looks like, they're the actual, well not the actual, but they're just the best figures you can get, or anybody could get with these two vehicles. Let's see how they go. There we go, pretty close actually, closer than you may have expected. I think that torque of the LandCruiser is what helps heave it off the line. And as I said, heavy vehicles like these, half the struggle is just getting them even to 20, 30 kilometers an hour. And in fact, if we have a look at the 0 to 40 kilometers an hour times, the Patrol took 2.18 seconds, and then the Sahara was 2.6. So it's half a second. And then that gap kind of maintains throughout the whole sprint actually. The quarter mile, the trap speed in the LandCruiser was actually higher, 151 kilometers an hour versus 149.0 kilometers an hour in the Patrol. Now I did a few runs. The other run, 146.1, 15.61 seconds. That was a 7.82 seconds run. It's worth keeping in mind that I have scored different results in both the 300 series and the Y62, different variants slightly, but yeah, different fuel, different weather, different fuel quality, different fuel level, all makes a difference. The quickest I've got in the Patrol is 7.04 seconds, 0 to 100. So there is some scope here for this to be even quicker. I've seen other overseas times saying, 5.9 or 6.3 or something like that. I don't think the Australian version, I don't know what's different, but I just don't see this ever hitting a 5 second 0 to 100 time. There's just too much weight and not enough torque in my opinion. Still both very quick vehicles though. For this sort of thing, I know they're obviously not made for this sort of thing, but I think I've always said anything in the 7 seconds range or below 8.00 for 0 to 100 is quick enough to be fast and quick enough to, dart through traffic, get up to highway speed, entering highways and so on. It's a comfortable amount of acceleration. So it's good that these both are well within that range. So what's the best out of these two? Well, everyone's going to have a different opinion. It really depends on what you prioritize, I guess, but let's go over some figures. Sorry, this is going to get a little bit technical. I've got all the figures here, so I need to compare. Fuel consumption, 14.4 litres per 100 in the Patrol versus 8.9 in the LandCruiser. So obviously if fuel usage is a concern for you, the LandCruiser is going to be the better option. But let me put it to you this way. The starting price of this Ti Patrol is $95,600 excluding on roads, while the Sahara is $139,310 excluding on roads. That's a difference of $43,710. That, if you put that into a calculator, $43,200 actually will get you about 150,000 kilometers at $2 per litre at 14.4 litres per 100 kilometers. That gives you a bit of an idea of, you might be paying more in fuel with the Patrol, but you're paying a lot less to buy it initially. So you could use some of that leftover change to feed it petrol, for example. And 14.4 is a pretty conservative figure, or a reasonable figure. I've achieved lower than that in the real world, but also higher than that if you put your foot down a lot. While the LandCruiser is still around 10 litres per 100 or more, depending on what you're doing, depending on how much you floor it and so on. That torque comes in strong, and if the engine is surging, like really boosting up, then that's equal amount of petrol going in or diesel going in as well. So if you're spending a lot of time going up hills and so on, you will get a higher consumption rate. What about towing? Well, they're both rated at 3.5 tons, so there's no winner there. But let's just have a look at the GVMs. So the Patrol's GVM is 3,505 kilograms, while the LandCruiser Sahara is 3,280 kilograms. It's a bit lower, but you have to keep in mind it is a little bit lighter in weight. So let's just calculate that. 3.505 minus 2,786 minus 350 kilograms for the tow ball download. Let's say it's about 10% or 8 to 10%. Let's just go with 10%, the highest. You're left with 369 kilograms of GVM once you hook up a 3.5 ton trailer. So 369 kilograms for any passengers, any cargo in the boot. It's not really that much, is it? The LandCruiser, 3,280 minus 2,620 minus 350 kilograms, you're left with 310 kilograms. So it's even less again. So if you hook up a 3.5 ton trailer, like a big caravan or something like that, at 3.5 tons, you're going to be left with 310 kilograms for any passengers. So that's easily a family, at least 2 adults and then 2 kids, something like that. You're going to be pushing close to that 310 kilogram limit. Sorry if I've said kilowatt or kilometer. sometimes when I'm talking, the words come out and you look back at it during the editing and you go, why did I say that word? It's not that I didn't mean to. I don't read off a teleprompter or anything like that. So it's hard to, there's a lot of kilogram, kilowatt, kilometer confusion going on. Let's take a look at the GCM. 7,000 kilogram GCM in the Patrol, 6,750 kilogram GCM in the LandCruiser. So if you minus off the curb weight, minus off 3.5 tons for a trailer, you're left with 714 kilograms in the Patrol. You're left with 630 kilograms in the LandCruiser. So in both scenarios, the Patrol is better for towing at the maximum rating. I mean, you're going to have more left over. Both of them will run into the GVM before running into the GCM. So you'll need a GVM upgraded for either. The Patrol is offered in the Warrior spec, and that actually bumps up the GVM as well, but it is a heavier vehicle. So you've got to calculate those figures again. But yeah, overall, you have to say the Patrol is better suited to towing heavy stuff. Now, off-road, again, the Patrol looks better on paper. 272 millimeters of ground clearance versus 242. The approach angle, 34.4 versus 31, 26.3 departure angle versus 25. But all the figures are in favor of the Patrol. By the way, I'm getting the figures from Redbook. This is a kind of database in Australia for all vehicles that are on sale and previously on sale. The figures I've found, especially in the last few months, have been wrong. Like, I don't know where they're getting the data from, but so yeah, please forgive me if some of these figures aren't exactly right, but I'm just comparing both like for like, so both via Redbook. Now, I have taken these both up the hill climb I've been testing on, quite steep and rugged. Let's check out how they went. To start with, I'm just going to be in the default mode. I'm not going to touch any of the drive modes. I'll hit the off-road pages and we'll get that graph going. Let's see how we go. So I haven't touched the stability control or anything like that. We do have a crawl mode we can try out as well, but I just want to see how it does in the absolute default setting. It's not even bothered one little bit. All right, now we'll just throw everything that this thing can do at it. This doesn't come with a rear diff lock, which is a little bit sort of unfortunate, I guess. Although, as we saw, it doesn't really need it. It does have a center diff lock, so we can lock the front and rear. Because remember, this is full-time four-wheel drive, so it's always running in four-wheel drive. So it does have a proper center differential, so you can drive on the tarmac and whatnot. But we'll put it into low range. Okay, the diff is locked, little symbol there on the dash. We've got a surround view monitor, so we can keep an eye on where the wheels are. You can change the view around a little bit. Although that's... No, it does go transparent, that's cool. So it records the ground in front of you, so it can keep displaying it. So as you're going over rocks and whatever, you can see what you're doing. So this will be even easier up here, although it didn't seem like a challenge at all. Like, there's hardly any wheel spin, even in high range. Things are like tanks, they just go anywhere. A little bit of wheel spin then, but the system's got on top of it straight away. Feels like it's got a good turning circle as well, like it loops around that little top section really easily. Okay, going back down, we'll hit the crawl control or downhill assist. So this is basically like cruise control, and it can take you up or down hills with complete control, and it will just maintain this speed. So I've got no feet on the pedals. It's just going to take me down with complete control. I like the way it's not letting the vehicle roll ahead and then catching it. It's just constantly just maintaining that speed the whole time. Slowing right down there to a stop. But yeah, I feel very secure. It feels like the system is constantly aware of what's going on here and just allowing me to get down. Okay, up the right hand side here. Now this is going to test out the ground clearance mainly because these little mogul or pothole things are very, very steep and deep, and they're perfectly placed. So opposite wheels are compressed while the other two are unweighted and, you know, released all the way down, almost topping out the suspension. So the wheels are going to try and scramble for traction, but we'll just see how the system manages it. We'll listen out to see if the side steps scrape as well, or any underbody. Might have touched the bracket for the side step slightly, but absolutely no problem at all. And I'm just touching the throttle. I could put my foot down more if I wanted to. There's not, you know, a massive amount of stability or traction management going on where it just really slows down the vehicle. Like it's allowing me to go through at the speed I want to go through. Just like the LandCruiser, to start with, I'll just go up in complete default mode, so on road, without the diffs locked, not even in low range, and stability control left in its default position. I haven't touched the tyre pressures either, just like the LandCruiser. Good throttle response with this petrol V8. Bit of wheel spin, but it sorts it out and just climbs straight up, no problem. Okay, now we'll try maximum attack mode. So I'll put it in rock and we'll flick it over to low range. We'll also hit the rear diff lock. Get a little symbol on the dashboard there. Just roll a little bit in neutral just to let it engage. So there we've got rock mode, rear diff locked, and in low range. The stability control has gone into its own setting, or it says limited driver's aid VDC setting off. This will slow things down a bit. And with the diff locked, I suspect there won't be any wheel spin to contend with or to try to harness. Stability control is activated still. Or traction control, I heard the relay flicking away. But yeah, that's just walked up there, no problem at all. Okay, hill descent control activated now. We'll go back down. It's always a bit hairy tipping over the edge here. Feet off the pedals completely. It's rolling away a little bit there at the start, but now it's nice and controlled, maintaining a speed. You can hear the individual brakes being applied. I'm still in low range as well, just to help it out a little bit. But yeah, pretty good. It's not the absolute best hill descent control. I find there's two different styles. There's ones that will roll a little bit and then catch, and then other ones that just constantly adjust the speed from the get-go, and this one's the former. So it did roll a little bit to start with, and then it caught it, maintained excellent control all the way down. I find that it's about 50% of vehicles out there do either or. Okay, now up this more difficult section on the right hand side. We did have a lot of rain in the last few weeks, so I think this has been washed away a little bit compared with the LandCruiser 300, so I'm not going to mark it down if it does scrape a little bit more than the 300. It also looks like it's been chewed out there a little bit on that one, the second one up, and then in a little bit, you see that someone's been churning it up a little bit, but that shouldn't affect us too much as long as it hasn't been churned out much in that actual hole. Still in low range, diff locked, rear diff locked. No problem with clearances so far. Oh, just touched the side step a little bit. But look at that, just walk straight up, no problem at all. There was no traction issues and a very minor scrape with the side step, or what sounded like the side step on the left hand side. So as you can see, they both charged up the hill climb, no problem at all. I think the LandCruiser does offer a bit more wheel articulation, a bit more flex. It does have a live axle rear end, and you know, that's all the guys in the pub will tell you, that live axle is better for articulation, but it does seem like that rear wheel just compresses right up into the wheel arch compared with the LandCruiser. It seems to pop the wheels off the ground a bit earlier. Now, it doesn't seem to make any difference because it still charges through no problem. The Patrol, even in Ti spec, has a locking rear diff as well, which is a bit of an advantage. But yeah, if I was going to do serious off-roading, I would probably take the LandCruiser between the two, even though the figures, in terms of those clearances and so on, stack up better in the Patrol. In terms of living with these two, boot space, interior and so on, it's good that the Y62 has been updated with the latest dashboard, nice big touchscreen on the front there, and a more modern dashboard, because the previous one with the wood grain was just a bit 1990s in my opinion, whereas now it's just much more in line with current trends. I think the LandCruiser does present a little bit more modern. It's got a lot of buttons and so on, which I like, but I can understand some people might not like that. They'd rather everything in the screen. I think the Patrol does offer a bit more room, particularly in the second row, and the floor doesn't seem so high, whereas the LandCruiser, yeah, your knees are kind of sticking up a little bit, particularly in the third row, whereas this has a nice third row with decent amount of leftover boot space as well, even with the third row up. But yeah, in general, I think the Patrol does feel more spacious all around, but particularly for the second and third row. So what do I think's best out of these two? Well, as I said, they've been contesting each other for decades, and I think a lot of it is just brand bias, or you know, you're a fan of the brand. For example, if you're a Nissan man, then you're going to go with the Nissan. If you're a Toyota man, you're going to go with the Toyota. I think I'm a bit more of a Toyota man. I haven't ever owned a Toyota, and I probably will never own a Toyota because they don't make what I like. Same with the Nissan. They just don't make what I like specifically, but it doesn't really matter what I sort of like, I guess. On paper, the Patrol does stack up better. It's got more power. It's way cheaper to buy to start with. It has better clearances for off-roading, and it is better prepared for towing, as in you've got more leftover weight once you hook up a heavy trailer. So that's definitely your buy if those things are important to you. Where the Toyota stands ahead, I think, is brand reputation and reliability. Even if it's kind of a perceived reliability, I think Toyota wouldn't want to risk, you know, if you've got a problem with the vehicle, I think they wouldn't want to risk ruining their reputation by not fixing it, if that makes sense, even if it does break down more than a Nissan. These are all just assumptions though, they're not actual facts. If you own a Toyota LandCruiser 300 series or a Y62 Patrol, please put in the comments your experience, because that will tell us more than what I can kind of just judge over testing them for a week. But I think the Toyota has better brand reputation, better brand reliability overall. It's been around in Australia for a long time, as has Nissan, I guess. But I feel like Nissan's it's a bit more in trouble in terms of its future, whereas Toyota seems a bit more locked in. It's not owned by 50 different brands. Yeah, that does appeal to me a little bit, but also resale value. So I'm just going to do a bit of a comparison here, and I've used the 2021, so about 4 years old, Nissan Patrol Ti because it's just kind of more in line with the Sahara, I guess. Just for this comparison anyway, you could use the Ti, and I'm sure the differences will be similar. So looking at the 2021 Nissan Patrol Ti, its price when new was $94,115. The Sahara from 2021, so this was still a 300 series, was $131,190, so still a big gap there. The average selling price, according to Redbook, so this is the price that people are selling them for, not necessarily the sort of perceived value. Average selling price is $71,175 in the Patrol TIL 2021 versus $107,975 in the Sahara LandCruiser. That means the Patrol has held on to 75.6% of its initial value or initial cost, while the LandCruiser has held on to 82.3% of its initial cost. That, to me, is pretty important when spending this much on a car, because when it comes time to sell or trade it in, you're likely to get more back with the LandCruiser, although you do have to pay more to begin with. I get that, but even so, I would rather have something this is just my personal opinion too, it's just my personal taste. I'd rather have something that I can get some value back for this style of vehicle. If it was a specialist vehicle like a sports car or something like that, even my car, I've got an X3, the resale value is just plummeted, but I like the car, so that sort of edges up a bit more for my priorities. If you love V8s, petrol V8s, then that's going to push the Patrol higher, and that resale value won't have as much of an impact on your decision. So yeah, I hope that's some sort of conclusion for you. I would pick the LandCruiser. I can't explain why exactly, but I think it's mainly because of the resale value. I think the on-road driving is a little bit better in the LandCruiser as well. The Patrol steering is a bit funny. It's kind of like a cam lobe where it's like it tips either side from center, and the driving position is quite perched up. It's almost like you're sitting on a bar stool, which is great. That's going to appeal to some people. You've got an excellent view all around you. You've got that commanding driving position. But yeah, in terms of on-road, I feel like the LandCruiser just sits a bit nicer in terms of sitting in it, and it just feels a little bit nicer to steer. They're both not the best handling vehicles out there, as you'd imagine, and especially in TI and TIL, it's a little bit sloppy. I would go with the Warrior if I was going to pick a Patrol, because the suspension upgrades they did in Australia make it more suitable for our conditions, country roads with bends and so on, off-camber bends and just weird, some of our bends on our roads aren't consistent. You'll turn in and it will get sharper, whereas overseas they have nice consistent bends. So that sort of stuff matters to me, at least. And if you've got a steering system that just feels nice and consistent, then that makes it easier to drive on our weird roads. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching.